But when you stay in that toxic cycle, when you keep riding that ride where you feel sick and you know you want to get off, but you keep staying on it, then it's like, and I think you brought up a good point of being honest with yourself and taking some responsibility in it, like even if they are a terrible, terrible person, you have to, okay, then I'm going to step away. Then what can I do? You know, um, being honest with yourself about what your contribution is, what your mindset is.
Welcome to The Ownership Game with Gary Montalvo. What would it take to get into the driver's seat of your life and leave your mark? The Ownership Game starts now.
Today we bring back to the show my friend, divorce coach Cari to do a follow-up on our March 12th episode, Embracing Life After Divorce. To my continued surprise, that episode has been the most downloaded episode in our podcast history, by a lot. So clearly, divorce is a topic that you guys are interested in. For this episode, I thought that we would focus on one of the most difficult aspects of life after divorce, co-parenting. When you don't have the luxury of just cutting things off, how do you navigate co-parenting when you're so weighted by the history and hurt of the past? How do you put a failed relationship aside to create space for the new relationship of co-parenting? All the while honoring your needs, maintaining your boundaries, and in some cases, your personal safety. By no means is this easy to tackle, which is why I'm glad that I don't have to do this alone. Welcome, Cari, back to the show. So, welcome back, Cari.
Thank you.
So, if you don't know Cari, she's been on the show before. She's a friend of the show. And her March 12th episode is the single most downloaded episode in the history of the ownership game by
Nice.
a lot, actually. And you know what was really interesting is that I was really nervous about that episode. Or maybe not nervous, but just like wondering, like, I'm like, is this the right topic for the show? Is this, and not because I think the main reason is because, it was so early on the show. I was still
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out the voice and the direction, and divorce is one of those topics that, it's like uncomfortable to talk about. It's messy, but it makes sense to me because when you do the math, we've all been impacted by divorce in some way, shape, or form. Like even if you don't come from divorced parents or have been in a divorce, you know someone, right? Like your friends,
Right.
and chances are very good that you come from the divorce home or
Right.
that you've been divorced yourself, right?
Yep.
Um, so it makes sense that I think this topic, and actually received messages saying like, thank you so much for actually going there and talking about this. It was really valuable.
Awesome.
So, I thought it'd be great to have you back on the show because obviously it's a rich topic that I think that makes a difference for a lot of people. And I thought that this time we could focus really on life after, right? And particularly, um, you know, if you have kids, how to navigate that, how to like really uh figure out how to continue to have a relationship even though after you severed your relationship, because that's
Right.
the tricky part. On some levels you're like,
Right.
yeah, I'm out of here, but no, not really.
Right.
um so yeah, so let's talk about let's start with like what are the sort of like first steps that you um work with your clients after, right? Because I think on some levels you probably, I mean, it's so confusing. I mean, we've both been divorced, but it's
Mm-hmm.
confusing because you on one level you're like, Woohoo! Even, in some another level, you're like mourning, and there's like all the shame too that I remember. I remember being so excited to be done with this mess, but
Mhm.
also mourning that my life is not going in the trajectory that I thought. And I remember feeling all the shame, and people kind
Mhm.
of feel it. The way that people responded to my divorce was almost the same way that people respond to like cancer. They're like, "Oh my God, I'm so and I'm like, "Oh no, no, it's okay, it's amicable. We wanted this, it's fine." But it's still
Right.
like this, like, "Oh my God, you have the scarlet letter." You're like, "Oh my God, I'm so," they lower their voices and they start speaking about like this really shameful
Right.
thing is
Right.
happening, right?
Rubbing your shoulder and it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, I know it's gonna be okay. I know.
I
So, yeah,
do,
go
you
ahead.
know, when you're married and if, you choose to have kids or you do have kids, whatever if it was a choice or not, but you do have kids and then all of a sudden you're facing divorce, it is like grieving because you've created this narrative of what life is going to be like, right? Like what the holidays are going to be like and what vacations you're going to go on and the house that you're going to live in and all like your entire life. And then when divorce happens, you're letting go of all of those dreams, all of
Yeah.
those plans that you made. So there is some grieving there, but I know for me, there was a lot of grieving in the beginning and it was a dark place. But then I realized all the things that I was gaining,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So it was sad, but then it was like, you know what? I don't have to worry about this. And I don't have to check with that. And like when I make dinner, I just make dinner. I don't have to worry about you don't like onions or you don't like mushrooms or, or whatever it is, Like I don't
It's
have
the
to worry
little
about it.
things that
Yeah, if the clothes make it in the hamper or whatever. So like there is some light and there is some peace that come a little bit later when you settle into things, but I love that you want to talk about the kids because that's really my focus. I say that I don't put kids in the middle, I put kids first.
yeah,
Um and when two people are getting divorced and they have kids, it 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 makes things a little bit more complicated. It
yeah,
takes a little bit longer. The process is more expensive. Um, and it's a lot more emotionally draining because now, when you're two people and you get divorced, you go be with your family for the holidays or whatever. When you have kids, you want to be there for all the holidays. You don't want to be
mhm.
there for half the holidays, right? Or the every other birthday. Like, that's not good enough. You want all of them. And that's just not reality,
What
you
are
know?
some of the common patterns that you see after um, that we should dive into?
So, a couple things. So, really when parents decide, okay, we're going to get divorced, typically, and this is not every situation, so please don't come for me, listeners. But typically the mom is the one that's doing all the things, right? She's the one that's packing the lunches. She knows who the teacher is. She's helping plan the class parties and all of that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
then mom and dad get divorced and they, at least in the state of Florida, we always start off at 50-50, right? So 50% of the time is mom, 50% of the time is dad. And mom is like, he doesn't even know who the kids are, who the kids' teachers are. He doesn't know what size shoes they wear. Like, he's never going to be able to pack them a lunch because, little Tommy doesn't like crust on his sandwiches, whatever. Here's what my question is like, can dad learn?
Yeah,
Can dad learn who the teacher is? Can dad learn how to pack the lunch? Can dad learn where the school is? Because that's what's best for the kids, you know? Um, and a lot of the time, fortunately for the kids, the other parent that may be the less involved parent steps up, probably because they have to. right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're doing 50% and they don't have a partner that's going to be meal prepping and laundry and all of that kind of stuff. They have to step up. So now they're more involved in their kids' lives. And how is that a bad idea?
Yeah.
You know?
And probably
Um,
what's happening there is there whatever unresolved letdowns from our relationship. Well, like, how are you? Well, you never did this when we were together, so how are you going to do this now? Right? Kind of
right,
a thing, I would imagine
right.
is in the way,
And there's
which,
and there's a lot of resentment that comes when
yeah,
whatever parent starts stepping up. Then it's like, well, you never did
why
this when
didn't,
we were together. Well,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
if you would
yeah.
have done this when we were together, we would have been better or whatever the case is. And yeah, maybe that's true, but they weren't really forced into it because somebody else was doing it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
or that spouse, moves on and starts a new relationship and possibly, a new family or has stepkids or whatever, and they're more involved. Um, and I don't know about you, but I haven't found a working DeLorean lately. So we can't go back in time. We can't
yeah,
change what has already happened. So let's take whatever's happening and embrace it for the future, for the days to
yeah.
come.
So so what I'm really hearing is that part of it is you have to be willing to almost start fresh in a way and let go of whatever happened. It's like, okay, new moment. How are we, like, this is a new relationship right here, right? This new
Correct.
co-parenting, it's a new, which I get for the mind is tricky to let go, but there really needs to be a commitment to start fresh and allow both parents and kids to show up newly with new patterns, with new commitments. Because if you're dragging the past constantly with you, if you're constantly referencing, then you're just stuck in an old pattern, in an old
Right.
relationship,
Right.
suffering and trying to hold people to, maybe the people grow, right? Like, I mean, you
Right.
do, like, divorce, it does teach you a lot, so maybe there's an opportunity for the other partner to learn as well. Okay, that makes sense. Do we go into what happens when they don't, or do we are there other patterns? Because I know
I
some
mean,
people are already like, I can hear the questions even before they're asked.
right.
Like,
Right. So like, hopefully the person is going to step up, right? But the other part of divorce is, when you're married, you have a lot more influence on your spouse, right?
mm-hmm,
Um because they don't want to hear the complaining or the nagging or whatever you want to call it. They don't want to hear it. So the socks are going to make it into the laundry hamper. When you're divorced, there's a lot less influence that's happening there, right? But you have to focus, in my opinion, you really have to focus on what's best for the kids. So if one parent is bad mouthing the other parent, how damaging is that for the
yeah,
kids? Because I put it like this to my clients. Imagine you have two best friends. Two best friends. You love them both, but they're very separate two best friends. And you have a birthday party and you want both of your best friends to be at your birthday party, right? Because they're your best friends. And your best friends hate each other and they fight with each other. Like, how miserable is that for you? That's your kid. You're
yeah,
the parents are the two best friends. So, no, the two parents don't have to be best friends, but getting along well enough, or at least swallowing those comments, right? Because you don't want to put your kids in the middle of it. You don't want your kids to feel like they have to choose sides,
yeah,
or um you don't want, your kid is half of you and half of your ex. So if you're talking bad about your ex, you're kind of talking bad about your kid, right?
mm,
Or at least that's how they internalize it,
yeah. Or
you
I would
know?
imagine that it would feel even, it would have to be unsafe for them in some way, because if you're speaking poorly about half of, our parents are everything when we're that age, right? They're our sense of security. They are our worlds. They not only that, they guide us in the world, right? They're the ones that model and mirror for us. So if you are tearing down half of that support system for me, it would have to create unsafety for me in some way, like, right?
Right. Right.
And the other thing that I was go ahead, you go ahead.
I can hold on to it. You go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say the other thing that I thought about is I think on some level when you're a kid, I'm not a therapist, so but when you're a kid, you are seeking your parents' approval, right? Like that relationship, your parents' love is one of the life forces, one of the things that nourish us, like, it socializes us, it gives us safety. And so when, when now I feel like I cannot fully love my other parent because somehow that betrays this relationship. I mean, I've seen that personally and what that does. I've seen that in my own personal family, and it creates, this situation where now the kid has to feel like they have to be different people in each relationship, and they can't fully share themselves and in the entirety of their lives because that might affect you or hurt your feelings, and I don't want to hurt your feelings, so I can't really tell you that, oh my god, our vacation was amazing, we had a great time, or I really like what, I ate for dinner last night, or whatever it is, all those little nuances that, are life. No, well, now I can't share that authentically. Now I can't be that authentically because it creates this situation where now I have to moderate the conflict between these two adults,
Right,
and I'm
100%.
10.
And that is not a kid's job. A kid's job is
No.
not to make two parents get along or filter the information, right? And like what you're saying about being, okay, so I have to be this person at mom's house and this person at dad's house, and I can't say that I really like dad's new girlfriend because that's going to hurt mom's feelings. And then the kid can't be their true self, right?
Yeah.
And then it creates this anxious attachment style because, I can't be who I want to be and I have to be who they want me to be. And how exhausting is that?
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, that's
Um
exhausting for an adult. I can't even imagine for a child.
right. Right. It's just it's way too much. And what I was going to say was you brought up modeling, right? So think about little kids, like 1 year old, 2 year old, 3 year old, when they're learning to walk and they're learning to talk. Now, chances are you learned your first language was whatever your parents spoke, right?
Hmm.
Because they're modeling, because they're teaching you by modeling. They're not like sitting down with a workbook and all of that kind of stuff. They're teaching you by modeling. If they're yelling, if they're screaming, if they cheer, if they support each other, they're all of that is modeling for kids, and kids are constantly picking it up, right? If mom and dad are loud talkers, chances are the kid's going to be a loud talker. Um, you know, if dad gets angry at the football game or whatever and punches a hole in the wall, chances are if the kid gets angry, the kid's going to hit the wall or something else. So kids are always watching and they're always learning. And what I try to ask parents is like, what are you modeling? Are you modeling forgiveness? Are you modeling tolerance? Are you modeling, resilience? Do you get angry at yourself if you forgot the mayonnaise at the grocery store and beat yourself up about it? Or are you like, oh, not a big deal. We'll just make something else for dinner. I'll pick it up tomorrow. Because all of those things your kids see and they learn, oh, this is how I should act. When
Yeah.
I mess up, when I forget something, I'm going to beat myself up about it. Or do I just say like, "Oh man, that's unfortunate. I'll get it tomorrow." I mean, I'm going to write myself a note. kids are constantly learning, and they're absorbing everything that you do, whether it's good or whether it's bad.
Yeah. And I'm gonna take that a step further. So I'm reading this book by Lisa Feldman Barrett, who is a neuroscientist, and I think it's called 7.5 Lessons of the Brain. She's amazing. She also wrote How Emotions Are Made. And what she's explaining in the book is she's going into the book is really explaining different myths that people have around the brain. One of the myths, this whole like nurture versus nature thing. And
Mhm.
what she's saying is that it's not really one or the other, that it's actually both. That the
Mhm.
way that you're being nurtured actually impacts the wiring and development of the brain. And that if that you that they did these experiments of like well, they did a study, and I think it was in Romania, that there was such a huge overpopulation of children in orphanages, and it was just basically like warehousing them. They were like there, they were not touched, they were not spoken to, they were just fed and
Mhm.
changed the diaper. And so these kids
Mhm.
received no stimulation, no nurturing, no touching, no nothing. And all of them had developmental problems. And so what they know now is that how you are modeling for your children and speaking to them is what actually teaches them how to focus, how to pay attention to certain things, how to place a value on certain things. So what you're talking about is actually not even behavioral. There's not even just a behavioral impact.
Mhm.
It actually impacts how their children's brains are developing and
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
children's brains are wiring. So it's a huge impact
100%.
to this type of
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, listen, my son is in 3rd grade, and this year he has had a couple of days of questionable behavior because he's talking too much,
mhm.
right? Well, if you know me outside the podcast, I'm a little bit of a chatterbox, and so is his dad. And
Mm.
so I said to my son the other day, I'm like, "Well, honey, like, who can you sit by that you're not going to talk to?" And he said, "Mom, I talk to everybody." I was like, "Okay, you come by that honestly." And like, I don't always think that that's a bad thing, right? Because I'm like, well, he's friendly, and he
Yeah,
feels
yeah, yeah.
comfortable, and all of that's kind of a good thing. But it goes back to that nature versus nurture, like the genetic component versus the social aspect of it, what he sees and what he's experienced in his life. Um, and I think too, like, when you're modeling for kids and your co-parent makes a mistake, right? Because that's going to happen. We're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. Maybe you're going to forget to pack the lunchbox, or you're going to forget to return the shoes, or whatever it is. How you respond to that is so important, because, again, that's modeling for your kids. Oh, it's okay. I'll call dad later and I'll get it from him. Oh, that's okay. We have an extra lunchbox. Oh, that's okay. You'll wear these shoes instead of those shoes. Because life happens, but modeling that graceful
Mm,
response,
mhm.
giving grace to that co-parent, because none of us are perfect. It also goes into when your kid messes up. Is your kid going to think, "Oh my gosh, you're going to come down on me like you did the co-parent?"
Yeah,
Or are you going to show me grace like you showed them grace?
yeah. So I I think, I think we've made the case for getting getting your stuff together afterwards
Mhm.
to be a great co-parent. I think it would be valuable to spend some time. Like, what if you find yourself stuck in an old pattern? What do you find yourself stuck in a toxic relationship with your ex, and you know you I don't know if you I don't want to say you can't get out, but the experience is like we keep doing this over and over again. And I know that this is bad, and I know that this is not good for our kids, and but this is what we keep doing. Like, what advice would you have for someone in that situation?
So I'm sure that everybody's familiar with the saying, if nothing changes, nothing changes,
Hmm.
right? So you have to be the catalyst of change, because what I have learned is I don't have much input or impact on a lot of other people. But I do have a lot of say about how I act and what I do and my mindset and all of that kind of stuff. So you make the decision that you have to change something. Now, that could be no response, right? No response is a response.
Yeah.
It could be now you're going to start showing the grace, whether they do or not. But kind of, making a shift, making a change, possibly reaching out to somebody and getting their input to help you, right? If you're, trying to lose weight or trying to exercise more or change some habit in your life, you're probably reaching out for help, right? You're reaching out to a support system. If you're so stuck in this system of behavior, you might need some outside help, right? Think about it. If you're, an addict or an alcoholic, you reach out for support, you reach out for help. If you're trying to train for, some sort of fitness modeling competition or whatever, most of the time you've got some help to get you into shape, to get you where you need to be. So same thing with this, like if you're stuck in old patterns and you can't make the change, then I would say then you need to get some help. Now, a lot of times people get so stuck on, pointing the finger at the
There you
other
go.
side, right? Well, if they just did this, then I would do something. Well, if they said it like this, you can't do that. You can't depend on somebody else. You can depend on yourself. You need to make the change. You need to, whether it's working with a divorce coach, whether it's, I specialize in co parenting, or a therapist, or somebody that's going to really challenge you and not tell you what you want to hear. Because chances are you have a friend or a sister or somebody that will listen to you and maybe press a little bit, but they're not going to push you over the edge. They're not going to challenge you because they don't want to damage the relationship.
Yeah. And they probably are enrolled in the whole thing with you. And
Right.
so, you know what I mean? Like your ecosystem is probably holding in place this thing and your beliefs. And I think what you just said is so gold. I want to really just spend some time hammering this in because it, you cannot, you're stuck in this pattern. You can't just keep going. You can't, it's shocking to me how many people are just going along with the storm, and it's like, no, dude or dudette, you have to get off this ride. Like, you
Right.
have to get off this ride. And what is this just the rest of your life? No, like, get off the ride, go get help, speak to a therapist, speak to a coach. And here's what I will also say, it's really difficult to get off this ride by yourself.
Mhm.
Not impossible, but if you're in the matrix, you don't know you're in the matrix. You can have the best intentions in the world. You can have the best heart in the world. And I'll even give you that it was their fault. I'll give that to you. Okay, for now. We're going to come back to that later. But you still have to get off the ride.
Right.
If all those circumstances are true for you, you still have to find a way to get off the ride. And you can. I promise you, if you invest in, you know, some structure that supports you in untangling these things and breaking them apart, and you having an honest conversation with yourself and getting an ownership, because yes, maybe your ex is crazy and you have all your friends that are validating you that your ex is crazy, but whatever button your ex is pressing is your button, right? That's your button. your ex can be as crazy as they can be, and you still don't have to fly off the handle. You still don't have to respond in that way. That's where you have power, which is what Carrie's pointing to. But you've got to get an ownership, and you got to be willing to get responsible, and you got to be willing to let go of this like thing to be right. Right?
Yeah,
Like
the tit for
it's like
tat,
we
right?
want to be right, right? Like we just really want to be right. Our egos are
Yep.
so invested in being right, and we will start wars. We will bring down nations in order to be right. We
Yeah.
will commit genocide in order to be right. You know what I mean? And I
Yep.
know I'm being dramatic to make a point, but if you break it down, all these things that we're seeing on a society level, it's this need to be right, this like willingness to fight to the death to be right, and you're doing it too in your home, in your relationship, in your family.
Mhm.
When you give up that, I don't need to be right, I just need to do what's the most empowering thing for me. I don't need to be right. I just need to do what's best for my kids right now. I don't need to be
Mhm.
right. I just need to honor both parties in this moment. It
Right.
changes what is now at the forefront of driving the show. And I
Right.
think that's really key for you to be able to move forward and let go of the past. Otherwise, that button, that trigger is just always there, you know?
Right. Well, and I think that your peace needs to be more valuable than your need to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there's plenty of it okay. I thanks for letting me know. Okay. Just as simple that and what you're kind of saying is like I hear you, but I'm moving on, you know? I'm not subscribing to this anymore. I got to move on because your peace is more valuable than anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you stay in that toxic cycle, when you keep riding that ride where you feel sick and you know you want to get off, but you keep staying on it, then it's like, and I think you brought up a good point of being honest with yourself and taking some responsibility in it, like even if they are a terrible, terrible person, you have to, okay, then I'm going to step away. Then what can I do? You know? Um, being honest with yourself about what your contribution is, what your mindset is. I think some people like the drama. They like
Mm,
the spice. They like it. Um Peaceful can be really boring sometimes. So they stay in the drama or maybe they're just afraid of being alone,
yeah.
you
Or it's
know?
just what they know. Like if you
Right.
grew up in a home where this was how people communicated, chances are you're going to repeat those patterns, right?
Right.
So I do think that there, you listen, we all have programming running underneath the hood that mostly we're not even aware about.
Mhm.
Like we all do. I don't care
Mhm.
how kind you are, I don't care how good you are. We all do. And doing your work, I mean, I strongly, but like, I'm a strong believer that when you get your marriage license, you should be required to do like some therapy. With the moment
Yes.
you find out that baby's being born, you're like, okay, here's your mandatory therapy course. Go get yourself.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
this stuff brings up all of our hidden and unresolved patterns from our childhood, from our parent
Yep.
relationships, and if you're not doing your work, you're just repeating that pattern in automatic, and it's not even you authentically creating what you want. It's just some past pattern playing out, and now you're there automatically. So
Right.
definitely invest in doing some type of work, and give up this need to be right. I think those are the first two things. The other thing that I would say is when you're not triggered, when you guys are both at your best, I think it's something that I've seen really work is like both parents sitting down and creating a new vision, creating a
Mhm.
new contract, like, and really like,
Mhm.
what are the rules? How are we going to, what are the kind of parents that we want to be together? how do we want to do this? How do we want to treat each other? And I've even seen people create documents and rules and like these are the things that these are the our values that we're going to honor moving forward.
Mhm.
And it becomes like a guiding document for what's next, you know, because I think
Right.
now you're instead of like living into the past, you're creating a new
A vision.
future. Yeah,
Right.
and I think that's also a really powerful exercise. And I've seen parents like committed to still being together. And what I mean by that is like they'll go to parent teacher conferences together. They will go to the kids' plays together. They will
Mhm.
go to the athletic, teams together. Their birthdays
Mhm.
were both there. I mean, I've even seen it as far as like Thanksgiving, both parents are there and both families are there and your partner and my partner are sitting here and your partner's kids and my partner's kids and I've even seen that, which is like,
Right.
wow, that
Right.
is,
Right.
that's
And I think
remarkable.
too, like, I think that would be like an ideal situation, right?
Yeah.
Where mom and dad are coming together and we're coming up with this together. Chances are, most of the time, you can't do that
Yeah.
because if you could do that, you'd probably still be married, right? But I think that, like, if you can't come together and create this vision, you can still have a vision of your own. You can still create, how do I want to parent? How do I want to move forward? What do I want my kid's life to be like with divorced parents? And a lot of the time, most of the time, we have these parenting plans, right? But parenting plans are only until the child is 18, maybe 20, right? But parenting does not end at 18 or 20. Parenting continues with, college graduations and children and marriage and buying their first house and all of these big life events. So you have to figure out how you want to show up no matter what's going on with your co-parent, you know? Um, I'll tell you a little side story. Now, my ex-husband and I have not always been on the same page, and I don't even know that you would say that we're on the same page today. But in 10 days, 11 days, I am going to attend my ex-sister-in-law's wedding.
Mm.
I'm taking my son and we're going, and my ex-husband will be there with all of his family and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm going for my son, right? I'm going to show up for my son so my son is comfortable and all of that kind of stuff. And also for that sister-in-law and her new husband and all of that kind of stuff. But like I'm putting my stuff to the side because this is what's best for the kids,
Yeah.
right? I'm still keeping my own boundaries and all of that kind of stuff, whatever I need to do to make sure that I feel okay about it.
Yeah.
But, I take pride in that because I'm practicing what I preach. I'm not just telling other people to do it and doing something different behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Um, Putting your kids first and modeling for your kids, this is what should happen. And this
Mhm.
is how you can do it in a fair way and a peaceful way moving forward in your life is so important.
Yeah. Let's go into that a little bit because I can also hear somebody watching the show saying something or to the fact of like, well, how does that not so I'm taking care of my kid but not taking care of myself. Like me
Mm,
going to that wedding would be like, whatever, right? Like it would be unsafe for me, that would be awful. And how am I, showing, my kid how to take care of himself when here I am putting myself in a harmful situation? Like, I don't think that's your thing. I think that you would say that if you felt you were going to be harmed in that situation, you would probably come up with a
mhm,
different solution.
mhm.
But let's just acknowledge that and talk about it, right? Like, would that be the case?
100%.
I'm speaking for you right
100%.
now.
For me, two things come up when you were saying that. Number one, not every situation is the same. I'm not even sure
Yeah.
that two situations are the same. I have seen, on social media, probably highlight reels of co-parents going on vacation together and doing birthdays together and holidays together and all of these different things. And I think I have thought to myself, like, man, I wish I could do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it it's not just in my control, right? There are many players in this game. So everybody kind of has to be on the same page. So that's part 1 is don't compare your situation to somebody else's because you never know what's going on with them. You don't know how much work it's taken for them to get there. Um or the
That's good.
reality of it, right? Like the highlight reel versus like the uncut version.
Yeah.
Um, the second part to that is, and I kind of mentioned it, is putting those boundaries in place, right? Saying like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go to this wedding, but I'm gonna have my own accommodations. I'm gonna have my own rental car. Um, and keep in mind, it's been 5.5 years since we split up. So this
Mm-hmm.
didn't just happen overnight. Um, and, I'll report back to tell you how it goes. I think it's going to be fine. But in the event that it takes a turn, I've already kind of thought about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, um, I've kind of thought about depending on how things go, right? I'm keeping my eyes open, you know.
Okay.
I'm not going in and expecting all of us to sing kumbaya and take pictures together and be besties at the end of the
Yeah.
weekend. Um, and I think that everybody kind of has to do what they're comfortable with. First and foremost, safety is number 1. But then, like, what's good for your kids, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm really hearing in in that situation that you're putting yourself in is, number one, there's a willingness to there's a willingness for you to own your own experience and your own interpretation of that experience. And so you're going to step into the situation fully responsible for yourself and for knowing that you can handle anything that comes up, right?
Mhm.
So you're not going into the situation as a, I hate this word, but it just I was gonna say as a victim, but it's like, that word can be so triggering, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
But it's you're really going in there in full ownership of your sovereignty and full ownership of yourself and what you can do, and that, to me, and you're also going in there with a commitment for your kid. And
Mhm.
so, because I think the boundaries are kind of tricky, because I feel like boundaries a lot are being used as a way to be right and as a way to me avoiding the work of my personal work, right? Me
Mhm.
avoiding my, I want to keep myself in my comfort. And so I put up this boundary. And so you are willing to get uncomfortable in this situation. And that's the part
Mhm.
that I think is key. You're not holding up because a boundary could be, I'm not getting uncomfortable. I'm not going in that situation. I'm not going.
Right.
Sorry, kiddo. And that could be a
Right.
boundary. But you are not doing that. You're saying, okay, I'm willing to get uncomfortable. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to be open that this is going to be great, and I know what I need. I have my things in place. And so there's a way that you're just approaching this, not from being right, but from being responsible, and from honoring everybody. And I think it's really beautiful. And yes, it's not right for everybody, for sure.
Right. Right.
So
And,
we want,
keep in mind too that my my ex-in-laws have all been very respectful surrounding this,
mm-hmm.
life event. The bride called me and she's like, you can come, you can not come, you can RSVP right away, you can do a late RSVP. I want you to be comfortable, I want you to be good, blah, blah, blah. She got
Yeah,
it. She understood. You know what I mean? And she kind of gave me like an exit strategy.
yeah,
I'm good. I want to be there for
yeah.
my son and I want to make sure that the bride and the groom have an amazing day. And I'll help in any way, you know, to make that all happen, Make sure
Yeah.
that my kid is comfortable and happy, and the bride and groom have an amazing wedding, while respecting myself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Whew, I feel like we can keep talking about this forever and write like multiple books. What any final thoughts as we wrap things up here that you want to share with people?
I don't think so. I think that, my main thing that I want people to take away is that modeling piece, right? The modeling, and I keep saying it, but it's so important, whether you're modeling self-care, you're modeling boundaries, you're modeling your behavior, you're modeling your diet or appetite, whatever it is. You're always modeling for your kids. And you want to be a good model because your kids are going to do whatever you do. So if you're healing, if you're growing, if you're, having standards and building tolerance and giving grace, that's what your kids are going to do.
Yeah, I love that. And not just now, they're gonna model that 30 years from now in their relationships, and when
Right.
they are you know, if they're going through a similar situation, they're gonna model it that way as well. So I think it's a really important key. And I think that the for me, there's two bottom lines. Number one is don't take for granted that there's going to be a reinvention that needs to happen now because this is new.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have to change. You're going to have to do some work on yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to be on the ball even more because the last one didn't work, obviously. So you have to come newly here with the lessons from the past in this new dynamic, in this new relationship. And if you're
Right.
just coming at it, repeating the same, holding the same, with the same triggers, with the same, defense mechanisms, with the same communication styles, with the same things that didn't work in the past, well, guess what? It's very likely predictable that how this is going to go.
Right.
So this is really a place where you have to step into ownership and get committed to learning new ways to have these conversations, to manage your emotions, to model the behavior that you want, that you would be proud to model for your kids. And do not assume that that is just something that you can make a decision about. It is something that you have to make a decision about, but you also need support, you need training, and you need to really humble yourself and let go of the ego and really be more committed to peace, as Carrie said. Be
Mm-hmm.
more committed to modeling the behavior for your kids that you want instead of winning that fight, instead of sticking it to them, instead of, proving your point. Those are things that can be super enticing, when you're fully in your humanity, but
Mm-hmm.
there is no cheese at the end of that tunnel, as we like to say in coaching, right? Um, so Carrie, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you.
I appreciate the perspective that you bring and the really this just a place that you create no judgment and an experience of it's gonna be okay and you got this and now let's build let's create what's next. So I just really appreciate that you bring that to a topic that is very sore.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Gary.
Absolutely, and have fun at the wedding.
Thanks.
Co-parenting after divorce is tricky because you're not coming to it with a clean slate. Before the first meeting has already happened, you are coming to the table with a laundry list of past grievances, hurt, betrayal, not to mention your own feelings of grief, guilt, and failure. All of this is thrown into a bag, shaken up with the impact that this is having on your kids, and served on a hot platter, which you have to start dealing with immediately before you've even had a chance to process which way is up. It's a lot. But perhaps the most difficult part of it is that moving on requires you to take 100% personal accountability. I know, I'm going there. But you can't really be too surprised. It is called the ownership game after all. Now look, I'm not saying your ex isn't a jerk and that you have to let them off the hook. You may very well have some valid points and you may very well be justified in all of your feelings. This isn't about that. This is about you owning that you are 100% responsible for how you choose to interpret and therefore experience a situation. This is about you owning that you are 100% responsible for how you choose to respond. See, what I see more often than not is we get caught up in wanting to be right, in trying to make a point, in trying to stick it to the other person, in trying to punish them, dominate somehow. Even when you have a point, you can choose to participate from a place of power, from a place of grace, from a place of what's best for the kids. And not because you're trying to take the higher road. That can also be about you being right, by the way. But from a place of what's going to give you and your home peace of mind. What's going to give you a more empowering experience in this situation. What's going to best model the behavior that you want for your children. And none of this is to say that you allow yourself to be a pushover, don't honor your boundaries, and hold your ex accountable. But it is to say that when you do it, it's actually about that and not about anything else. I know this is not easy. Navigating this requires constant self-reflection, radical personality, and most of all, radical honesty with yourself. Are you saying no because there's a legitimate reason or because the current girlfriend is going to be there? Was this an honest mistake that you can simply move on from, or are you making a bigger deal of it because this is reminding you of something else from the past? Again, this is not easy stuff, but the only place where you will find power, healing, and a great role model for your kids is when you're doing your own work. As always, thank you for joining me this week. If something that we have said here has made you think, please share this episode with someone who you think could use this message. It does a great deal to support the show, and most of all, it does a great deal to spread the message of empowerment, which is why I do this after all. I will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Ownership Game with your host, Gary Montalvo. Make sure to like and comment on your favorite podcast platform, as well as subscribe so that you never miss an episode.